20 past 9 on 90.3, 95.3 ABC Sunshine Coast. Annie Gaffney's my name, and Councillor Joe Natoli has ducked into the studio this morning to have a bit of a chat about the mass transit system proposed for the Sunshine Coast and how that's all played out, especially yesterday, given there was a special meeting in regards to the draft plan and the need to go back out to the community to consult with them over it. Councillor, good to have you in here.
Nice to be here, Annie.
We were just saying it's a rarity for us to have guests in during COVID times. So we know you've signed your stat deck. You're all safe.
I am.
Yeah. All right. So you've had a bit of a win since you've been back in council on a number of fronts, but this is the biggie, isn't it? The mass transit system, in terms of what you say was, people don't really understand it, and we need to go back out to the community with what's intended before it goes to the state government for endorsement to have a business plan developed. Why was that such an important issue for you?
For me, I've lived on the Sunshine Coast since 1970, and I've seen the coast grow from about 30,000 people to about 340,000. We've got another 200,000 people to come here in the planning horizon 2041. So, but what council wants to do is put most of the infill development in this little corridor. And when we look at it, the potential could be 80,000 people in a corridor, since white settlement has only housed 23,000 people. So it's 5 times that density. So when you look at the impact, and when we start to say, this is our lifestyle, people board in this area, they've got homes on the beach or canals or wherever it might be, but that's a lifestyle with that sort of density. And yes, there will be an increase over a period of time, but not to the extent. This is a game changer in terms of the approach that the council wants to do. But I'm not convinced that it's all about public transport, because when I look at what council has done, they've used public transport as a means to bring the public along this journey since 2012. But when you look at the urbanisation strategy that they attached, that they've never told the community about. I didn't even know about this before I got elected. So it's been a secret process going through. But when you look at the documents, it talks about unleashing all of this infill development, reurbanisation, and they use light rail as a conduit for the greatest amount of unleashing that development, the greatest potential. It was interesting at yesterday's meeting, they started to downplay all of this. Instead of high density, to talk medium density. Instead of 80,000, talk 20,000 people. The fact is the document doesn't lie. There are parts in that document that really concerns me.
Now, the document apparently is quite massive, and we won't have access to that as members of the public until the end of the year. Was that correct? It'll be released later this year ahead of the consultation?
We still have the interim documents, and they've all been released, and this we've been able to gather some of that information. But the fact is that when I went public, and when MTAG and Tracy Goodwin McDonald and Kate Harvey, who were at a meeting, we got this information just by chance. We were told things that we had no idea of. And so we now have this group that's gone out and started to alert the community. Now, the preliminary business case was going to come to the 20th of August ordinary meeting, and it didn't. It fell off the agenda. And all of a sudden, things were starting to change. So I put that notice of motion to say we must consult the community, because the community's never been consulted about this urbanisation strategy. It's going to change things. It's going to change the feel. And if that's what the public want, then that's fine. But if that's not what the public want, they need to be able to have that opportunity to intervene and say they don't want it.
For people who don't understand where the proposed corridor sits for the mass transit system, where does it start and finish?
It starts at the Newtown, the city.
The city centre behind us here in Maroochydore?
Yes. So basically on Aerodrome Road, and it continues along Aerodrome Road, then goes into Alexandra Parade. When it gets to Mooloolaba, it turns right down Benning Street where Coles is, continues down Wayland Street, which is closed at the moment, and then turns right into Brisbane Road, all the way through Brisbane Road, goes over the canal and the Mooloolaba River, and then goes into Minyama, along the Nicklin Way, Bedina, into Warana and then turns right into Mains Drive and heads towards Quina Way, does a left-hand turn on Quina Way and finishes at the hospital.
All right, and eventually there would be probably a southern section through to Caloundra at some
So that's
stage in the
stage
future.
one,
Okay.
just over 13 kilometres. And then the next stage is the section from the hospital all the way down to Caloundra and connecting Caloundra.
Now, tell me about the section that you're particularly concerned about in terms of the density aspect of this.
Well, the density is pretty much all the way through.
Okay.
And it was the first time I heard it, but the Mayor got up yesterday and talked about the industrial developments that we have in the Quina area. And there's quite a significant amount of industrial land.
Yes, there are.
Not only there, but on the other side of Quina Way as well. And of course, the light rail's coming through that area. And of course, to unleash all that potential, we'll, from what I can gather, what he said is that they'll all go. We'll end up with residential developments in that area. And so what we were told previously by the officer that's working on the mass transit urbanisation part is that there'll be 16 stations along the 13 kilometres, and each station will have a radius of about 400 metres of high density around each station. So when they talk to us about, it's only going to be around the stations, if you evenly divide those 16 stations and from point to point it's 800 metres, that's 12.8 kilometres. So when we talk about the potential of density of 400 metres either side of that, it pretty much is high density all the way through. Now, they're talking about medium density.
What is medium density? How many levels is that?
Well, it's hard to say because I could imagine that you could still probably get at Talinga Street, where it's a 7-storey building, you could say that was, even though it's in a high density, but then high density you can get a 45 metre level. And at Talinga Street it's 21 metres, still high density. So that there will be just differences.
One of the things that I spoke with the previous Gold Coast City architect who had been drawn to his job originally in the late 90s by the excitement building around a rapid transit system for the Gold Coast. He says that, the plan is great, but what you do need to have in place is a very good city plan or planning structure around the corridors to prevent wild speculation on the land along that corridor. So what have we got in place already to prevent that from happening here on the Sunshine Coast?
Well, we don't at this stage. And the trouble is that once they colour in those zones, if they go medium density, high density, it's basically a blanket provision. There will be incentives. They talked about a toolkit of incentivising developers to be able to go in. So I'd imagine where they amalgamate blocks and put things together, they'll probably give development bonuses. I don't know what that means. They couldn't explain to me, but they will develop a toolkit to make this happen. Let's not get this wrong. We have a mayor and we've had a previous council that have been on a development charge. We've seen them unleash development potentials all over the place. And the infill development along the coastal fringe would be something salivating for all developers to want to do. It's the easy developments. What the report doesn't deal with is the urbanisation strategy. Where are we going to house the 120,000 people that they say are part of the infill development? We know where the greenfield developments are going to be. It's happening in Parkview, it's happening in Aura, and eventually Beerwah East. But the report says that these communities are building communities that are basically going to be car-based. And so we're going to have possibly 80,000 people live in those that are all going to impact us because if they want to come to the beach, they will have to drive. So there's no solutions for anywhere else outside of that 13 kilometres. And to put all the development there, as we know, you cannot survive on the Sunshine Coast. If you want to go and visit friends, you want to go unusual places, you need a car. So I don't honestly believe that we will be able to deal with the problem if we put 80,000 people into that corridor. If they get the maximum development that happens and people bring their cars, the roads will not be able to cope. But the option is the heavy rail, because the heavy rail goes through Beerwah East, Aura, and I think instead of allowing them to build low-density dwellings, as they are, we should be saying that's where the high-density, transit-orientated communities should be. Connect Beerwah with the rail track to Brisbane, all the way through those new developments, and make them orientate the developments around public transport, and then you can connect Caloundra, Quina Hospital, all the way through to Maroochydore, because the corridor has been there for more than a decade, and I don't know what the focus. We could have park and ride facilities. It could actually be the solution and the spine for major transport, but council did not give the consultant any other option to look at except this 13 kilometre.
Okay. One of the other things that the former Gold Coast City architect raised with me, Philip Folland, was that where he believes they got the Gold Coast wrong was, he said, look, we were locked into technology at the time because we only had, steel tracks to run the trams on. You guys could go trackless technology up there. It's available and it would be fantastic looking, much better fit into the landscape. But he also said all the lovely components of what they'd proposed, which was green spaces, sculptures, much more blending of that hard infrastructure into the Gold Coast landscape to give it a softened feel and to make it much more community oriented, was taken out because the state government ends up paying for most of this, and it just goes to the most effective, cost-effective bidder. And to do that, they just remove all of that lovely stuff. And he said their project would have looked much better if that had been left in, and it's a learning for us here on the Sunshine Coast to make it a compulsory form of, or part of the plan when we do get there, is that whoever gets that contract must include those softer features into it. What's your take on that?
Well, I certainly agree that if we're going to build anything like this, whether it's roads or whether it's light rail, heavy rail, whatever, but we've got to make sure that they don't impact our communities in such a negative way, in that their hard infrastructure, they need to be softened. We need to make sure that that happens. But I think the other problem too you have is that the Gold Coast light rail system hasn't reduced their congestion. They only have 5% uptake in sort of public transport, and 60,000 people that are seniors can travel for free on their buses over there. They've got magnificent new electric buses, unlike our old 15-year-old diesel buses that we have here. But I think the options of looking outside of this light rail corridor are really where the key lies. And I think then you can look at all of the ways that we connect the rest of the community to this main heavy rail line, because being connected to Brisbane, being able to have the option to have in all the growth communities, because at the moment the fastest growing regions and parts of the coast are not on the coast itself. It's in Palmview and Aura, and with Beerwah East coming, that's owned by the state government, that will be another major development area. And if we're just going to allow those areas to continue to grow and do rely on cars, I think it's going to be a major issue for us. And I think if we can contain all of the development in those areas and say, if you want to come to the coast, that's the area that you can go. Yes, we will still get an increase in development around the coastal fringes, but it won't be catastrophic.
But I guess given that how long it's taken to get any duplication of the rail line going on the North Coast rail line, I mean, how hopeful are you really that we could achieve a heavy rail connection through to Caloundra South, etc.?
Well, the Gold Coast is a private-public partnership, so that the council has contributed significant, hundreds of millions of dollars to the capital, as well as the federal government and state government. The state government being the bulk of it, but there has been overruns and of course the Gold Coast City. But the thing is, the Gold Coast City has been paying the deficit, the $40 million that it runs at a loss. It's been paid by the ratepayers. And they have a levy there, a transport levy, $128 per resident, per rate for residential and differential for commercial. They raise $50 million a year. And that's a burden that everyone has to pay. They haven't talked about any of this. I don't know. The Mayor keeps saying this is state government responsibility, but we've probably spent $10 million already on this. They've committed another $7.5 million. And in the end, if it is like the Gold Coast model, we will have to be in for some capital and possibly future operational costs. I'm not sure the public actually knows that. I don't know that. But they need to be truthful and tell the people exactly what we're getting. I don't believe it's a solution that's going to solve all of our traffic problems. Clanter Road, Nambour Connection Road. You tell me, we've got major problems all over the place. It doesn't have a solution for the university, the growth area of Sippy Downs. Come on, we can do better than this. And I think, there is an agenda. They say that I might be scaremongering, but I think there is an agenda to make, to put all of the easy development where the developers want to develop on the beach. And if that destroys the life and the lifestyle that we're having on the coast, I will fight.
Councillor Joe Natoli, good to have you in here this morning. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Annie.
Councillor Natoli there on the mass transit system that's proposed for the coast. What are your thoughts after listening to him speak this morning? 1300 903 222. Agree? Disagree? Would love to hear from you. And 0487 993 222 if you want to send me a text.